Congratulations, that's quite a haul. 2 big box trucks of food, that's great. I think if one positive thing that's come out of the last 40 days has been seeing people come together to feed their community. I think it's been really uplifting for me to see it in my town and just seeing it all over the state. So, give yourselves a pat on the back because you deserve it. So my name is John Kiper. If you don't recognize me, I ran for governor in 2024. I have lived in New Hampshire pretty much my whole life. I live in the Seacoast area down in Newmarket, where I've been running a restaurant for the last 10 years. And I have a son who's 9 years old, and he is in the public school system, and that is important to me. So I am running again because the issues of New Hampshire, frankly, have not changed. And in fact, they're getting worse, substantially worse. So we really need to have a plan in 2026 to attract independent voters, obviously get Democrats out, but also we're going to have to, frankly, win some people that are conservative-leaning independents, some people that voted for Kelly Ott. This is just the numbers. It's just how it works out. So to do that, I think we need to focus on the biggest issues that people are dealing with right now, and frankly, it's affordability. It's economics. It's the kitchen table issues. So I'm 42 years old. So my entire life, our economic system has been defined by Ronald Reagan, by Reaganomics, and this idea that from the Republicans that when you cut taxes for the wealthy and for corporations, the money comes magically trickling down to the middle class and the working class. And the truth is that that's not true. It never happened. It was never going to happen. And Democrats need to start standing up and saying this to independent voters. Trickle-down economics is a broken system, and all it has led to is massive inequality. And this is the problem. Trump is a symptom, but this is the problem. It's inequality. And if we don't start tackling inequality, it's going to rip our society apart, and it's already starting to happen. And so that's where we came up with a new idea, which is called community-first economics. And community-first economics is where, rather than investing in corporations and helping them do better, you help your local community. You help the single parent who's working 2 jobs just to pay rent and wants to go back to school. You help the elderly couple who's lived in their town for generations and they're getting priced out because of property taxes. You invest in the young person who's stuck in their parents' basement and is wondering if they'll ever have a house or a family of their own. We invest in the community first. And how do we do that in a practical way? Well, there's 3 issues that my campaign is centered on. And these are 3 issues that are important not only to Democrats, but they're important to independents and also Republicans. And that is, we need to change the way that we fund schools so that we can lower property taxes, so that we can incentivize more affordable housing. And these 3 issues are one issue, and a lot of people don't realize that, but they're stuck together. And you really can't solve one without solving the other 2. And it's pretty simple. Towns, planning boards and zoning boards did not want to allow large swaths of family-friendly houses because they knew that their property taxes would go up. And as a result, our property taxes are going up. Because what is the leading cause of inflation? It's housing. So we've got to tackle the property tax issue. We've got to fund our education in a way that aligns with not only our values, but with our Constitution. We went to a school board meeting in Claremont a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month now. And I'll tell you, those people are fighting so hard for their school. The teachers are, the parents are, and the administration and the students, and they have won multiple court battles, 3 court battles over decades. And the courts have affirmed time and time again that public schools should be funded by the state according to our Constitution. And the state is not living up to their end of the bargain. And so I am proposing not radical transformation of our tax system in my first term, to be honest with you. I think that we just need to go back to the tax systems that we had in the early 2000s. We used to have, of course, the interest and dividends tax, which brought in nearly $200 million a year. We used to have higher business taxes. We used to have an inheritance tax that was mainly on people with multi-million-dollar estates that were, not to family. And I think that if we go back to that time, to those revenue sources, those revenue streams, we will be able to get out of this fiscal doom loop that we're in currently. And when I say fiscal doom loop, I I'm not really exaggerating, because what is happening now is, because for decades we cut taxes, we did not have enough funding to cover health and human services in an appropriate way. So now we're seeing $500 million going to lawsuits for the YDC abuse cases. $500 million. There's been other reports of other people in children and vulnerable people that are in state care who are being neglected. And these are the people that suffer first when the state does not have enough money to run a state. And that's where we're at. New Hampshire simply does not have enough revenue to safely run New Hampshire. And this is because the Republicans continue to push this trickle-down economics. So it's really important that we focus on these three issues: housing, property taxes, and education. And I know this because I've been running a restaurant for the last 10 years. And the benefit of owning a restaurant is that I have been speaking with Democrats in my restaurant and Republicans in my restaurant and anarchists and socialists and communists and whatever. Whoever walked in the door and ordered a beer and a burger, I would sit there and chat with them. And as a result, I have, I think, a pretty good perspective on what the independent voters want to hear and what their concerns are, and even what the Republicans' concerns are. And I will tell you that a lot of the Republicans I've talked to, their issues are the same. It's housing, it's property taxes, it's education. You know, the way that we talk about solving those problems is frequently different. But I think we can win these people over by offering them something that the Republicans are never going to offer, and that is lower property taxes. The Republicans have no answer to that. I brought this up with many elected state reps, and they say the same thing every time, which is, it's your budget committee's fault. It's your town council's fault. It's your city council's fault. And frankly, that is just a lie. It's a blatant lie. We all know that. And I'll be honest with you. Before I got on the Newmarket Town Council, I thought I didn't really pay that much attention to the town budget, but I assumed it was someone at my town's fault. I'm like, why are my taxes keep going up? Why do I have to buy trash bags? You know, we don't have a pool in our town. We don't have special services, but yet our taxes keep going up. And it wasn't until I was on the town council and looked at the budget and said, wow, we are operating this town on a shoestring budget. And to come to find out, many towns and cities in New Hampshire are operating on a shoestring budget. It is not our towns and cities' faults. It is the fault of the Republicans in Concord. And we've got to explain this to the independent voters. It's so important that they understand that we cannot continue this way. It's not sustainable. We've got to raise revenue, and we need to have a big discussion in this state about who pays taxes and how they pay them, and what's fair, because the current system is simply not fair. And getting back to inequality, the number one way to solve inequality is good education. And that's why that is just such an important thing. And we've got the mandate from the Constitution, the mandate from the judicial, from the judges, and it's time to follow through on that promise to the children of Claremont and the children of this entire state, who all deserve a good education. So that's my spiel. I would love to take questions.
We're a small group. And Charlie, you have a question?
I hear your desire to make the property tax much more fair than what it is right now. Can I assume in part of your platform and part of your analysis, you looked at the so-called voucher system, and what's your take on the voucher system?
Yes. It's wild, frankly, that the Republicans would continue to call themselves fiscally conservative and then serve up a bill like that. It's preposterous. I don't know how. I do know how they got it way through. I mean, it was a lot of work by the Free State Project and these other, I'm going to use that in loose quotes, libertarian organizations that are funding them. We got to get rid of that. I mean, just a simple reading of the New Hampshire Constitution, it is illegal to send state tax money to religious schools. The founders of this state put that into the Constitution, which I assume would mean that they wanted that to happen. Now, of course, they've figured out a way to do it, and it's been deemed legal. I just still find it very hypocritical of the Republicans to claim to be the party of the Constitution and the party of rule of law when they're clearly not. And I think that's something that Democrats need to do, is reclaim the Constitution. Because frankly, I think most of our problems could be solved if we just enforce the Constitution the way that it's written.
Anybody else have a question?
John, I just throw in something? What bothers me the most is the Republican message that when they cut back taxes, they announced that they have cut taxes for the world. And it is now just starting to people to realize that when they cut taxes, your taxes, property tax goes up. And I think we need to make a big deal out of that because that's exactly what's happening.
100%, 100%. I mean, that is the message that people need to understand is the same amount of money is needed to run this state. And if we cut 187 million out of interest and dividends, it just means your property taxes are going up. And it's just such a crucial point to hammer home to people and to say to them, ask a Republican state rep how they're going to lower your property taxes. They will have no good answer except for that blame your budget committee. But yeah, I agree. We've got to hammer home that point that they're downshifting the cost to the local communities. And it's just not sustainable. We can't be dealing with property tax increases at this level. It's just impossible to plan for the future. It's driving up rent costs. It's driving up housing costs. I mean, when I first was looking to buy a house, this was quite a few years ago, but the guy who was doing my mortgage said, you know, you could afford $50,000 more house if you moved to Maine because the property taxes are lower. And I met someone in Claremont and they said, hey, we had to move to Vermont. It saved us $500 a month on our property taxes by moving to Vermont from Claremont, just across the border. So we've got to tell people, this fact just time and time again. We got to hammer it home that when they cut taxes, without telling you what services they're going to cut, your property taxes are going up.
Yeah, to put a specific point on that, I was lucky enough to have to pay $500 a year for dividends and interest tax. And that means that I have about $1,000 a month of dividends and interest income. And I had to pay $500 a year income tax on that. I didn't mind. I wish everybody in the state had that problem. But while they were doing their happy dance of eliminating that dividend and interest tax, my property tax bill went up $1,000 a year, and it keeps skyrocketing. So, you put specific numbers on it. More people got hurt than got helped, but there are people with a lot of money and a lot of power who got help.
Yes. I was talking to Dr. Tom Sherman the other day, and he said, think about how much the Sununu family alone would have benefited to the removal of the interest and dividends. I mean, it would have been in tens of millions of dollars. So you're spot on it. And I'll tell you something that's kind of, I thought was kind of interesting. I do a lot in social media, and I use it like a focus group. So I'll throw out an idea on there, and I'll see what the Democrats, the Republicans, and the Independents have to say. And, frequently the Republicans will be ripping apart my ideas, And there's this one guy, every idea I'd put up there, he'd have a criticism. And I brought up the interest and dividends, and he said, look, I'm a conservative leaning independent. I'm okay with the interest and dividends. I'm okay with that. It was 187 million, and the way we were getting it was totally fine with me. And I've heard other Republicans say the same thing. And that's where I think we're at a turning point, and I hope that other Democrats realize this. I had, the last time I was running, I had this conversation with Democrats, Republicans, and even I had a libertarian. He wanted to talk about this so bad. He called me up and he said, look, I am like the most libertarian ever, but my property taxes are so high, I'm willing to talk about an income tax or a sales tax. That's where it's gotten. And I'm not even proposing an income tax and a sales tax first term. I want to be safe about this. And I'm talking about taxes that we've already had before, that we're not reinventing the wheel. We just need to get back to the point where, again, we're not drowning, we're at least treading water.
John, I encourage you to look at the business tax. When they cut the business tax, it was not for an organization, a restaurant like yours. It was for Amazon.
Yeah.
It was for Walmart. It was for all of the big corps that didn't even have a place in New Hampshire, but their taxes got cut, but the homegrown businesses that we support did not.
No, you're right. And I mean, it was frustrating because I was looking through it. I think it was 2015. They basically made a deal with the Republicans. Hey, if the revenue gets to a certain point, we're going to cut the percentage. They did not make it go the other way, where if the revenue drops, we're going to increase the percentage, which in my mind, you would want to have a set amount of revenue and vary the percentage accordingly. But you're spot on. I mean, they're letting Walmart and Amazon get away with, practically theft, and And I think I saw I saw the other day in the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute said it's now billions of dollars that we have lost in the last 2 decades due to Republican mismanagement of the state. And we got to call this out because this is not fiscally conservative. This is not fiscally responsible. This is completely reckless way to run a state. And like I said, with the YDC lawsuits, you get to this point where there's not enough money to do things safely, and we will just end up paying in lawsuits going forward.
John, I know you're a big advocate of housing. This past session, they passed an ADU bill, but there was no financial mechanism to help fund anyone that was interested in doing an ADU because, one, interest rates are too high, and two, there are no incentives from the state to help towns expand water and sewer. How would you leverage an existing piece of legislation like this? ADU is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
How would you, or what are your thoughts on how to leverage that?
I've got a couple of ideas. I think one would be working with the New Hampshire Housing Authority. They generally do apartment buildings and stuff like that. I would like to see them get into more ADUs because I think it's a really good, especially for generations, where mom and dad can put an ADU, or grandma and grandpa can put an ADU in the backyard, and then the family moves into the house or something like this. And it's a really good way of increasing density without changing the look of our towns in a dramatic way. So I think ADUs are a really good and important tool. And it's funny, I pushed, when I first got in the ZBA in Newmarket in 2015, the first hearing I went to was about an unattached ADU. And they didn't let them do it. I voted yes, everyone else voted no, but I pushed, the planning board and the town council for about 5 years to change the law to allow unattached ADUs. And by the time they finally did it, the housing costs had gotten so high that the vice chair of the planning board, she said, I went to build a ADU in my backyard. She's like, it's going to cost me $200,000. So we're in this deficit of housing which was intentional, was created by planning and zoning boards. I mean, I don't think that they realized what they were doing when they did that, but now we are going to need some state investment to get those numbers back up. And another one would be the cannabis money. I mean, that was something I was pushing big in my last run, was putting the cannabis money aside specifically for housing. Because one great thing about putting money into a loan fund is if you're writing loans for mortgages, it's getting paid back and it's building back up. And we have some really good ways we already do that in the state with the New Hampshire Business Finance Authority. So there's a business model out there that's already set up. The state's already doing it with big corporations and building buildings for them. And if the state of New Hampshire can build a big building for Sig Sauer or BAE Systems, why couldn't we build the housing that those businesses are going to need for the employees?
And you brought up my favorite topic, and I won't belabor it. But in the last cannabis bill, there was a portion of the proceeds to go to Cs and towns to help them with water and sewer to build out to help that economic push that towns need. Otherwise, they can't build housing. I know that's in the current bill that Senator Fenton has that he's offering, which is sort of a version from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
In January?
yes, it's an LSR he has out now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the wastewater is such a big piece of the housing crisis that we got to understand that as well. I mean, one idea that I have talked about was the idea of putting and there's a million ways you could do this, but putting a additional tax on second homes, particularly in the Lakes region and around here, which you would then put that money specifically towards wastewater treatment plants. My town in Newmarket, we did ours, I think 10 or 15 years ago. And they were smart enough that it's only at half capacity. So they built in room to grow, but it was not cheap. And it was a bit of a battle. There was not a lot of funding coming from outside sources. And I think we've got to help towns have the infrastructure to expand their housing.
I'll ask one for my friends from Bethlehem that aren't here. I know we talked earlier about, our good friends at Casella.
Yeah.
Have not only not taken their foot off the gas in Dalton, but they're now refocusing on what has been a court-settled agreement to cap the landfill in Bethlehem. I guess my question is, how do you deal with, as a candidate, then, how would you deal with a corporation like that who really doesn't pay attention to DES or DEP or really doesn't respect what the state is saying to them, and then they keep pushing aspects anyway? How would you deal with it?
Well, the first thing I would do is not take any money from them, because I think that can be a bit of an issue with these corporations funding the campaigns. And I think that is really frequently the behind-the-scenes driver of a lot of this policy in ways that we don't always see. Transparency is so key. I think that there are some ways we can deal with Casella. I would like to see more statewide composting. I think that's a really good way to just limit the amount or lessen the amount of trash we have going into our waste stream. I think it's important to start thinking in a bigger, longer term way about how we're going to deal with our trash. How are we going to deal with it? And we've got big companies like Pepsi, Walmart that are bringing and making a lot of money off of the trash that comes into our state. And I think that a lot of other states have done a lot to hold them accountable. I mean, even just bottle buyback, the 5 cents for a bottle or something. Maine does it, Vermont does it, a lot of states do it, and there's some low-hanging fruit there that I think that we should go after. And in terms of specifically Casella and the trash coming from Massachusetts, I think there's some ways you could say, hey, we only want trash that doesn't have food in it, or something like that. I think there's some legal ways we could make it more difficult for them to deal with or try to expand waste treatment plants in New Hampshire.
The majority of what's coming in from Mass and Connecticut has what they call C&D, construction and demolition.
Yeah.
Those states outlaw it from being put in their own state landfill.
Yeah. And this is, you bring up a really good point, which is, and this is one of the strong reasons I want to be governor, I want a Democrat to be governor specifically, is because once New Hampshire has a Democratic governor, I think the Northeast and New England, but also the Northeast, we can start building better relationships with our surrounding states so that we don't have these issues where a state's moving from one city in New Hampshire, one city in Mass, or vice versa, or doing these things to avoid, one legal block in one place. And that's where I think the regionalization is going to be key going forward.
I bought my house in Lisbon in '93. And back then, one of the biggest issues was the Claremont case, which was ongoing. And another big issue was closing the landfill in Bethlehem. They've managed to keep both of those out there. Just a couple more years.
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest issues in New Hampshire, and this is a systemic issue, which we're not going to deal with in a 1-2 year term, but because everyone's on a 2-year term, the governor, the senators, state reps, everyone's really thinking 2 years ahead. And it's really easy to not think 10 or 20 years ahead when you're just trying to think, I need to get elected one more time. And that's why and I think we've seen a lot of governors, I think Kelly Ayotte's doing it right now, where she's just doing the bare minimum to project herself to the next spot. I don't think being governor of New Hampshire is her goal. I think she's planning on running for Senate or something else. I don't know what, but I think she's using it as a stepping stool. She's not going to solve any of these problems. That's not really why she's there. She's just trying to get somewhere else. And I think we need more people. Like, I have no desire to run for Senate or to be in Congress or do anything else except be governor of New Hampshire. And I think that's important.
I was a teacher, I think,
It's more for the mics on here.
Cindy Hope, Warren, I'm wondering how in the world a wonderful Democratic governor of New Hampshire could get anything done with the executive council the way it is.
This is true. This is a very good question. And I think that the thing that we need to remember, and the goal has got to be to eke out wins between now and 2030, so that in 2030, we've got the majorities and can rewrite the districts. I think we've got to keep that in mind, because that is really the, I don't want to say it's a silver bullet, but a lot of our problems are structurally built into the way that the districts are made. I mean, I was looking at the map the other day, and it's just wild. You look at the way that they cut it, and it's like, this is completely crazy. And I mean, I think at this point, it would be very easy to someone to write a computer program and say, hey, make districts that are fair and legal and, are going to be the best reflection of democracy in New Hampshire. That said, I've always thought that if you could get a bill written to eliminate the executive council and just bring it up every once in a while when they, were being cranky, because a lot of states don't have executive councils, they have lieutenant governors. And frankly, it is one of the other antiquated things in New Hampshire that we sort of tolerate in a way that I don't know that we should, particularly when they gerrymander the districts to the point where it's not particularly democratic. I think if we look at what our other states around us have done, you can see where there's an advantage to not having an executive council and having a lieutenant governor instead. That again, I have a vision 10 years into the future, and I think about all the ways that we can make our state better by changing systemic things, not just one bill, but this bigger vision for the state. And that's something that I don't bring up a lot, but I would love to see the executive council replace the lieutenant governor personally.
Well, that doesn't help with the next.
You're totally right. And that's where, we sort of have to be idealistic and pragmatic at the same time with a lot of these issues, because there's things that we're going to want to do, and there's things that we're going to campaign on that are going to be functionally impossible without majorities in any of these other houses. So that's where, I encourage people, remember when you're voting, don't stop at the governor. Vote all the way down the ballot, because every vote counts. And we need to have people fighting for these executive council seats. I talked to a couple people that are thinking about running, and I'm excited for what we can do in 2026. I really believe that we've got a chance at winning, because I think what's going to happen is that the economics in this country, because of Trump's tariffs and everything else, are going to get increasingly worse. And I think that we will have a very good argument to say, hey, the Republicans' economics is a failure. And the Democrats are offering an alternative system, being that we invest in the community as opposed to these corporations.
I got one for you.
Go for it.
Waving off of that. Oh, do you want the mic? Yes. Kind of building off of that. I know a lot of our funding for healthcare comes from the federal level, and we're all getting pooched, but do you have any plans of what New Hampshire could do to take care of at least the lowest income earners in the state?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big issue. And I think people need to remember that New Hampshire is one of the wealthiest states in the country. I think we're number 6, median income. So there is a lot of money here that frankly, and there's people here that are getting their taxes cut from Trump's recent, the BBB tax cut or whatever. And I think going forward, we're going to need to fill these gaps that Trump and the Republicans are blowing in the social safety net with our own funding. One thing in terms of healthcare that I've been thinking a lot about is something regional that we could do, working with Vermont, Maine, maybe Massachusetts, to have a regional Medicare that we could buy into. There's enough people. Vermont tried to do it. They don't have enough people, and they couldn't do it. New Hampshire couldn't do it alone, but with the population of the whole of New England, I think that's something that we could pursue in a realistic way. And I think it's going to become an issue, when people can't afford their insurance and they're going to the ER, and everyone's prices for insurance and stuff are going up. People are going to be looking for bigger solutions, and that's when I think people will be wanting to talk about something like a regional, healthcare system.
What can we do to get younger voters more engaged with us and possibly even interested in running in the legislature? Yeah.
So the biggest way that, me and Bree have been getting to people is social media. We do really pretty well at getting in touch with people on TikTok and all these other apps. I have probably 5 people a week that say that they're going to vote for me because of something I put on social media. And that increases. And it's becoming a bit of a snowball because there's other people, and the way that these things work, someone shares a video and then this person shares a video. And we're creating a bit of a community on social media of younger people who are making videos. I mean, there's one girl in Sullivan County just makes videos about Claremont and about Newport. And now I know what's going on in Claremont because she goes to school board meetings and goes home and makes a video about it. And, Bree makes some videos about up here, and there's other people, people in Keene. And so there's this infrastructure, this local journalism is almost sort of organically just happening. And there's a lot of young people that are really frustrated, and they want to be a part of the system, but they don't frequently. I mean, I've talked to people who said, I didn't know there was a Democratic meeting in my town. You know, they just didn't know. They didn't know where to look. So we've been trying to push them to come here. But even if they're not here, they're out there and they are engaged. You know, one of the things that, you know, it's just a reality that's really hard to get young people to run for state rep because they don't get paid. This is just, it's a fact. It's very hard for me to try to campaign and say, hey, you should run for state rep and we'll push this agenda together. Oh, P.S., the job doesn't pay. So I actually initiated a lawsuit against the state of New Hampshire a couple weeks ago for this issue. I found out that there's a way you can ask for judicial review. It's not a monetary compensation. It's basically asking the judges to review the fact that the state reps get paid $100 a year, yet the Constitution, Article 10, says that the government is supposed to work for everyone in the state and not just a specific class of people. So I'm probably not going to win, but I will tell you this. When I brought up this issue of the state reps not getting paid and it, frankly, being an obstacle to democracy in New Hampshire, young people get very excited. They get fired up and they go, oh, I get it. I understand why cannabis isn't legal. I understand why there's, you know, why we've been fighting for housing for 20 years, because the people that are in the state house are frequently just not reflective of the average person. And there's a lot of ways that you can measure that. But I think that people, even if I don't get that through, which even I don't win this lawsuit, for them to see me fighting for it has been really encouraging, I think, for them, for the young people saying, hey, someone is recognizing that there's a problem. I can't serve in Concord, and they're at least trying to do something about it. So I think that is really, you know, people just want to see action right now. They want to see Democrats fighting in the courts and you know, protesting and doing the Bridge Brigade and just like literally every action that is visible. That's what people just really are craving right now.
Any other questions?
I understand that your focus is on economics, being housing and taxing and so forth, but also there's I think, an extremely important issue in the country and in this state, and that's the rights of trans youth.
Yeah.
And it's very personal to me because my trans granddaughter had to move from New Hampshire to California for my granddaughter to be safe.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. That is a tragedy. I think the trick, what I'm talking about is the things that we campaign on and the things that we govern on are two different things. The Republicans, I don't know, do you know who Terry Schilling is? He's a Republican. So when gay marriage, this is, I think, just helpful. It helped me understand this issue a lot personally. But basically, when gay marriage was legalized in 2008, this guy, Terry Schilling, he's a Republican, he said, we need a new issue to divide the Democrats and to whip up the base. So literally, he just said, let's pick trans kids in sports. I mean, it was just, he could have picked any random group of people for them to pick on, and he picked trans kids in sports. So once you realize that this is basically a Republican operation, you know, that they're spending millions of dollars trying to influence independent voters to think that for some reason a trans kid playing sports has any impact on their life at all, you know, and it doesn't. It's just complete manipulation by the Republicans of the average person for them to think this. So I think it's important that we defend trans children for sure, and make sure that they know that they're included in our communities. And I think we can do that by focusing on these economic issues. Because when we win, then we can do these other things that are going to be harder to do. And that's where, you know, when you focus on the economic issues, people that are of every community are benefiting. You know, I know trans people that are struggling with housing. I know, you know, minorities that are struggling with housing. I know white people that are struggling with that. You know, it breaks that mold where I know Republicans that are struggling with housing. So it brings in more people into the fold so that we can then, you know, defend trans youth, defend LGBTQ issues, you know, fight for abortion, do these other things that we want to do.
I have another question.
Go for it.
Okay. I'll wait.
I have a comment.
Sure thing.
I think one of the problems is that the Republicans are extremely adept about messaging on these types of issues. It's like, okay, so they cut dividend as interest tax, my property bills went up, and when I drive down the street, I see signs, tired of higher taxes, vote Republican. And they win these battles, and we're always reactive. And the trans thing, I remember during the Harris campaign, she said almost nothing about trans people, almost nothing about civil rights generally. And all we heard from Republicans is, oh, she's always talking about trans people. And the media took the bait, so what do? Whenever they talk to her, they ask her, well, why are you worrying about trans people instead of affordable housing? And the so-called liberal media, my entire life has carried the water for the conservatives. No, I think we need to get better messaging. We need to get on the offensive. I don't know how it's done.
Well, I'll say one thing that I have found is at least somewhat useful is pointing out to people that Republicans talk about trans kids in sports because they do not want to talk about housing, education, and property taxes. You know, it's a diversion tactic. It's trying to get you to think about anything except for the fact that a small group of very wealthy people have got billions of dollars and you have nothing. You know, and this is the conversation I try to, whenever someone brings up this trans issue, I'm like, you are being sucked into a diversion. This was never an issue until 2008. You know, no one cared about who was playing children's sports before that. And so it's just really important for people to call it out for what it is, which is just the Republicans trying to not focus on issues that of economic, relations. Yeah.
They did the same thing earlier about abortion, picking a topic that the religious people could jump into.
Well, and that's it. And abortion, I mean, no one cared about abortion before 1970 something. And so we just need to make sure that the independent voters know, hey, you are getting basically brainwashed into caring about this issue that frankly was never an issue before, and it's not a real issue. You know, especially the kids in sports one drives me crazy. I'm like, you're talking about like three kids trying to play soccer. Like, how is this matter more than the fact that your property taxes just went up $1,000? Or
The bigger issue is their medical care.
yeah, and this is I think important for us to get back to New Hampshire basics of live free or die. That applies to everyone. You know, trans kids, LGBTQ people, everyone. And so for the government to be deciding what you can and can't do with your body should be a Republican. That should be something that they stand on but again, the Republicans have lost all of their values. So I think it's just important for us to call it out.
Yeah, they want smaller government, except where they want to rule it all women and kids. And
Exactly.
School, public
Yes. No, exactly. And I think that we've got to call it out, and we've got to make sure that, particularly people that are in the middle, whenever I'm talking to somebody, and this happens more often than I'd like to say, I'll be talking to someone, they'll say, well, I think the Democrats and the trans stuff, they went too far. I'm like, stop. You're getting sucked into a distraction because this never affected your life. You've been manipulated. You've been manipulated. And when you tell people that, they're like, huh. And then when I tell them about Terry Schilling and I say, look, there's this one guy, Terry Schilling, who came up with this entire plan and you are a victim of Terry Schilling's, mass manipulation. And then people are kind of like, wait a second. I think that there is an argument there. And it does come back to messaging and how we call it out. And I think when people know that there is a concerted effort happening on the Republican side to do all this isn't just random. This isn't just some random advocates. There's this bigger group, the Heritage Foundation, all these bigger organizations that are trying to manipulate you into thinking about issues that aren't housing, property taxes, and education.
Well, the Free Staters own the Republican leadership in the House.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And they do whatever they want.
Yeah. I think if you look at this state and even just the taxation, like I was talking about, it all started going downhill when they started showing up. And the one, I guess I would say the antidote to the Free State Project is informing people. And it's hard to do because journalism has been basically underfunded in this whole country, local journalism for the last 20 years. I mean, there used to be every newspaper had somebody in Concord reporting on what was going on. you ask the average person out there, hey, do you know about the Free State Project? 8 out of 10 will say, what are you talking about? 8 out of 10 will say, I don't know what the education vouchers are. And that's, going back to talking about social media, I made a whole podcast about the Free State Project and the education vouchers. And I put it out there trying to do my part to just get people to recognize this thing. Because when you say to someone like, hey, the Republicans just spent $50 million of educational money, not going to Claremont, not going to some poor town, but in large part going to private schools for very wealthy people. People go, wait, no, that can't be right. And to think that the fiscally responsible Republicans, are doing that, it's just crazy.
Somebody else wants? Okay, you talked about the vouchers again. I think we all know that town meetings are coming up in March, and I would like to be able to say X amount of money has been taken out of our budget, Warren Village School, for vouchers.
Yeah.
I think every town ought to know how much has been removed in Concord because of the vouchers. It's not like we get all the money and then have to send some of it back for vouchers. Concord holds it, the government holds it.
Yeah.
To go to vouchers, and then we get a reduced amount. I want to know how much.
Before we do that, we need to find out who is getting these vouchers. That I will tell you that the voucher system is set up so that the money that they claim goes directly to New York City. Now, if we talk $1 million, they get 10% of that for running it. There was a bill in that said, we need to, if we're going to have vouchers, we need to run it out of New Hampshire. We need to hire a person in the Department of Ed that can monitor it and can oversee it. Right now, the former Commissioner of Education said that they were not even, that New Hampshire was not allowed to do any checking of what's going on. They checked 25 people, and 2 were out of state, didn't live in New Hampshire.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that. Wow.
We need to bring that back to under the control of the New Hampshire Board of Education. We have a new commissioner, and I have worked with Caitlin before. I could not tell you whether Caitlin is a Democrat or Republican, but I can tell you she's for every kid in New Hampshire.
That's great.
I think we need to get rid of the voucher system as part of your plan to face property taxes.
Yeah.
Basically, property taxes in any small town in New Hampshire are twice what they should be because the state of New Hampshire does not adequately fund education.
100%.
It's been decreed for over 20 years.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do. But the Republican Party, and you're spot on right about it, the Republican Party is making my taxes go up every single year.
Yeah.
And that's because the courage doesn't exist in the legislative process, which all gets embroiled in the fact that we are probably not the most representative legislature, but possibly the least representative legislature in the country. And you can have somebody like the porcupines controlling the legislature with just 30 people.
Yeah.
And they can do it because that's how you get, we have to get people elected.
Yeah.
We have to get people elected. And you're right about asking people to go down the ballot, but I encourage you to keep up your analysis and attacks on property tax because that's an issue. It's, Carvin's right. It's the economy, stupid. And that's the issue that's going to pull people into your campaign. And if you can get off in a lot of diversions.
Yeah.
But the key is money. And if I have to pay $6,000 for property tax where I just used to pay $3,000, people really understand that and it hits home.
Yeah, definitely.
So keep pounding that.
I mean, this is kind of one of the things that I think the Democrats have failed at before is that you need a good message and you also need an honest messenger. And that's where I think a lot of the independent voters and even some of the Republican-leaning independents will trust me in the sense that I am fighting these same economic battles. I mean, I just got a $4,000 property tax bill. And me and my girlfriend are looking at it like, okay, where is this money coming from? We're going to have to pull out of somewhere. We've got it, but, it's going to be tough. And that's where I will fight for these issues, I think, harder than a lot of other people, because it's my own survival. Like, the state is becoming so hard for me to afford to live here that, and I've seen so many people in my community, so many regulars from my restaurant, young people just give up trying to buy houses and move wherever, move to Pennsylvania or something. And we had a couple that had lived in our community for forever and had, been generations in our town. And it was one of those guys that knew, he knew where the old town hall had burned down, and he knew all the old stories. And he lived in a trailer park, and he said, the property tax, I can't do it anymore. And then moved to South Carolina. And I mean, I think, people have got to realize just what an existential crisis this is, the property taxes, and it's driving up the housing, and it's just hurting our most vulnerable people, and it's pushing people out.
As a politician, I imagine you do a lot of door knocking, and a lot of those doors here in New Hampshire are independents. What do you say to the independents that answer the door to get them and convince them to vote for you specifically?
That's a really good question. I think, again, I hate to say it again, but you're bringing up just these economic issues. I was talking to a guy. It was really funny. I was talking to him at my restaurant. This was probably last year at some point, and I was talking about these same issues: housing, education, property taxes. And he's like, yeah. And then he was like, my kids' kindergarten, they wanted to teach this book about two gay penguins. Like, what's up with that? And I was like, man, they got you. Like, the Republicans got you. And I gave him the whole spiel. I said, look, this is a distraction tactic. They're talking about gay penguins because they don't want to talk about your property taxes. And, it took him a little while to sort of come around to the issue that I was trying to get at. But this is the barrier that we are fighting, is the Republicans have done pretty well on messaging. I hate to say it. They have convinced someone making, $15 an hour at a gas station that any increase in taxes is going to hit them first. And so we do have to work. We have to work hard. We have to show people that not only do we have good ideas, but that we're going to follow through with them. I think that's really important, that we follow through.
Something you just said, a light bulb went off in my head, because when they eliminated the dividends and interest tax, and when they cut the business taxes and everything, they're always saying, well, we have to lower our taxes, or all our rich people are going to move to Texas or Florida. Well, I think the people who move to Texas and Florida move there for a different reason that we can't do much about. But when you're talking about a young family that can't afford the property taxes, they really do move because of the taxes.
That's a really good point. And I had brought up this idea of a wealth tax in one of my social media videos. And I was just talking about, if we had I think it was a 1% income tax on people making over $250,000 a year, it would generate $150 million. And I was just trying to give people the numbers, like just understand 1% for people making over $250,000, what it would bring in. And it was really funny because in the comments section, there was some people that said, oh, everyone will the wealthy people will just leave. And then there was other people in the comment section, and I didn't actually know this before, but they said, actually, this was studied in Massachusetts when Massachusetts introduced a wealth tax. Nobody left, and people move for a variety of reasons, wealthy people, and taxes is one of many, but it's not the motivating factor. But that's a really interesting twist, and I'll have to remember that, because, it's sort of ironic to me that Kelly Out was running on this, like, don't mass up New Hampshire, because what the Republicans are creating is basically a state that is you have to work in Massachusetts to afford to buy a house here. You have to bringing Massachusetts wealth to New Hampshire to lower your taxes. I mean, that's their personal taxes. That's why they're moving here. I mean, New Hampshire is fundamentally becoming basically, a tax haven for wealthy people. And it's a race to the bottom. And I think these other states that are playing this game are going to also be in a losing position going forward. I think all the states need to recognize it does not help any of us if we're doing this, cutting taxes for wealthy people to try to attract them thing that isn't working anyway.
I mean, just a comment. You keep defunding, the state. Who's going to serve their tables? Who's going to wipe their asses? I mean, we are the workers, so we can't afford to live here. Who's going to do anything for them? I don't understand the long-term goal.
Yeah.
if we don't pay for public education, then those same people that are working at Walmart and stuff, Walmart's gonna have to fund, hey, this is how you make change.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but if you look at higher ed spending at the university level, I mean, there's a direct correlation between spending money on colleges and investing in people that are graduating from college and corporations coming to New Hampshire to find the employees that they need. And right now, they're not. I mean, I had a friend who was working for Liberty Mutual, and they closed down the office in Dover, and were basically moving everything either remote or to Boston. And I said to him, I'm like, why are they closing this huge campus? And he said, there's just not a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds for them to hire entry level, to work in insurance. They're just not here. There's no housing for them, And one of the problems with the university system being so high, particularly UNH, is New Hampshire kids go to college somewhere else, and then they discover, oh, South Carolina's got a very affordable lifestyle, and they don't come back. And so a state is getting older, and it's getting wealthier, and we are losing the people who are going to be taking care of our elderly population, the LNAs, the nurses, the firefighters. I mean, how many towns in this state rely on volunteer firefighters? How is that going to work when the average age is 50 or 60? It's going to be very difficult. And to your question, I don't know what the Republicans are thinking, because it does. And I mean, I thought it was at one point, almost a conspiracy theory. I mean, it almost seems like they're trying to drive anyone, who isn't wealthy out of this state. And they seem to be totally content with that. And
That's very Randian. That is exactly what the Ayn Rand books are talking about. They don't say who's keeping up the lifestyle once all of these hard workers who deserve what they got move to this utopia.
Yeah. I think the Republicans really, the idea that someone working, in a job that maybe doesn't pay as well is not working harder than somebody else who maybe is working a job that does. I mean, I was talking to one of my buddies the other day who worked for Fidelity, and he said that when he was at the lower end, he was doing, at the beginning, entry level, he was doing a lot of work. And he's like, I've gotten to this point where he's like, I get paid more than I've ever got paid in my life. He's like, I don't do that much work. He's telling me, he's like, honestly, I go to these board meetings and we go to meetings, but he's like, I was working harder when I was making $40,000 a year. Now I'm making six figures, and it's just, the Republicans frequently, I think, discredit actual work in a way that I find frankly offensive. Somebody working, as an LNA, that is a hard job. A nurse, teaching, like these are hard jobs that should be rewarded in the same way that any of these, white collar jobs where, somebody's making six figures.
A good teacher is worth more than a good loan officer.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah.
Anybody else? Take the mic, please.
Not completely relatable to North Country, but perhaps one day. But there's a comment on this is streaming TikTok about criminalizing homelessness, and where do you stand on that?
I think it's, well, not only does it not make any sense from a practical standpoint, because what's happening is that they're just pushing homeless people or unhoused people from one town or one area to another. I mean, that doesn't really make any sense. But fundamentally, I don't think that it's constitutional. I think if you look at Article 10 of the New Hampshire Constitution, like I said earlier, the government can't function in a way that it benefits homeowners over renters or over unhoused people. And I think that's just really important for people to understand that, if you have a planning board or a zoning board and everyone owns a house or is a renter, and they're saying a group of people that can't afford housing somehow don't belong there, I think it's just preposterous. It's immoral. And I went and talked to some of the unhoused folks in Manchester in Veterans Park there, and they said to me, we know we're not good for business. We don't want to be in this park. This is not our ideal situation. People act like we chose this, and they're like, just tell us where we can be. Just tell us where we can be. And the idea that someone just has nowhere to physically be, to me, is just wrong.
And another question in the comments, actually it's not really a question, but just a comment, because I had said that, we've all been saying, the youth are just leaving. There was someone in the comments who said, not just youth, I'm in my late 30s, my husband's in his 40s, and we can't afford a house.
Yeah. Well, I consider youth to be 42 and below because I'm 42. I was at Plymouth State. He goes to Plymouth State. I was out there a couple weeks ago, and I said, young people, we got to stick together. And he left, and he said, why did he say young people?
Yeah, it's young and 65.
Right, okay, so it's 65 below. Okay, good to know.
Get younger every year.
Right, I said.
Here's another one, and actually this would be great. This could be statewide, but really, I think North Country could really benefit from this. Do you have any plans for tech schools and boosting?
Oh, vocational schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you know what? One thing that an idea that I think other states have pursued, that I would love if New Hampshire pursued as well, is using our vocational schools to actually build tiny homes, ADUs. I think it's a great way. I mean, they're already doing, one of my employees was in high school, and he was part of the vocational school, and they were building like sheds and stuff. And I'm like, man, you're so close. You guys are basically almost building tiny homes. And I know other people that want to get into the trades, and why not have them build tiny homes that could house unhoused people, veterans, whoever. And it was kind of funny. I was talking to one of my friends about this, and he goes, "So you're saying the state of New Hampshire should sell tiny homes?" And I was like, "Well, we sell liquor, and if we could sell liquor, why can't we sell tiny homes?"
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You got one more? Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I got to go back and tuck my kid in before before he goes to sleep.